Welcome to an all-new episode of Her Playbook, brought to you by Kendra Scott. Her Playbook is a podcast highlighting inspiring stories of women in sport and business. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Keia Clarke, the CEO of the WNBA champion Liberty. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here.
I've got to say, the growth of not just the Liberty, but the WNBA has been exponential over the last few years. What have you noticed in your time in the league?
Yeah, well, I'll start by saying it feels great. This growth, this momentum has been a long time coming. You know, when I think about my career, and you mentioned with the Liberty and the W, between those two entities, I'm nearly 20 years in the game, just in women's basketball. So this moment feels incredible. And what I've noticed most, I think, is that it's the cultural shift. It's being a part of the mainstream conversation. When you work in it and you've got your head down and you're, sort of thriving and wanting, visibility, wanting to amplify what the women do, but it just wasn't resonating, wasn't landing in that way. To see what's happened over the last 2 or 3 years in pop culture, tunnel fits, it's translated to incredible viewership increases, corporate partnership investments from brands that want to do work with us. All of that tide rising at the same time is just remarkable. But I'd have to say there's a lot of people. There's a true foundation of folks who saw this and wanted it and worked toward it. And I'm just so happy to still be around the sport when it's happening.
Yeah. And you mentioned still being around the sport. You played college basketball. When did you fall in love with the game?
I did. Believe it or not, my mom asked me when I was about 7.5, 8 years old, if I wanted to go to basketball camp. And I said, nah, I just play for fun. I just like to dribble my ball in the neighborhood and shoot baskets. And immediately the following summer, the bug bit me. I started watching basketball on television. I was playing in the neighborhood, mostly with boys. But, when I say the bug bit me, I completely fell in love right around 11 years old. And it's never stopped.
And ball is life.
Ball is life.
You got your first job at the Hall of Fame. That's a cool first job. How did that come together?
Yeah, happenstance, quite frankly. I thought I was actually going to be a GA. For a tiny stint, I was contemplating going into coaching. Wasn't sure what I wanted to do. Wasn't sure if sports was right for me. And ultimately didn't get the job. It was my first moment of literal rejection, and it was at my alma mater. But fortunate enough, I'm from Connecticut. I moved back home, and I'm not too far from Springfield. I had gone to visit the Basketball Hall of Fame, as just a young hooper, pretty much every summer with my mom. And she happened to know someone who worked there. And we ran into, it was the CFO of the company. So, like parents do, she said, well, Keia just graduated from college. And I'm like, yeah, right, this guy isn't going to get me a job. Literally 3-4 weeks later, I was an account executive. I was hired as account executive to essentially sell tickets to the museum. So not quite sports yet, but a sports museum. It was sports adjacent. And I just learned so many, fundamental tools about what it meant to, be in a business space, be in a corporate space that lent itself to sports and athletics. And most notably, the history of the game. I don't know if there could have been a better beginning to my career than to spend my lunch breaks walking through the museum, learning about the history of this game that I love so much.
Yeah. And that redirection of the rejection, right? It's almost like a blessing. And seeing that there are so many more possibilities within the world of sport and business.
Absolutely.
And, after that, you took your talents to the league office. How did that transition come about?
Another cool story, and I often share this one with students. I wrote my thesis at NYU when I was studying for my master's in sports management on the WNBA. I had never been to a game. I felt like the target marketing was missing me. So I wrote this advanced special project, 30-page paper on the league. And my coach from college actually introduced me to someone who worked at the league. So again, right place, right time, perfect conversation. Because I was so hard on the WNBA, I think, in that paper. She was intrigued, I think, a little bit to maybe prove me wrong, maybe show me that it wasn't as easy as some may think. But that woman who I presented the paper to ended up maybe 4 or 5 months later calling me up and saying she had an entry-level role. So I got my start in team marketing and business operations at the league office, But from the start, I focused on the WNBA. You know, it was an NBA department, an NBA job, but at that time, there were very few people who were focused specifically on the women's side, and I was happy to do it, happy to learn, and just became a sponge throughout those years. There were some of the smartest folks and people who still work in the industry were at the NBA at that time, and really just, lent themselves to me and, taught me a ton about what it meant to look at the franchise business and how leagues actually support franchises.
Yeah. And getting that background in marketing is so important too, especially in the W. Now with the Liberty, can we talk about Ellie? Ellie is a movement, and what a unique marketing tool she is. This flamboyant elephant that has dance moves that rival video dancers. I just need to know everything about Ellie.
All things Ellie. I mean, Ellie, as you said, is a movement. She's a vibe. I have to say that from a cultural standpoint, I think it's really the Brooklyn flavor, the ability to dance, but the ability for many types of people to see themselves in Ellie that makes her so cool. Yeah. We are so proud of where that portion of our brand has gone, and we just continue to develop it. Who thought that a mascot could pull off the things that Ellie's been able to pull off, over time? We're incredibly proud of it. And what's interesting, and I think many people don't know, the Liberty had a mascot previous to Ellie that was very beloved. Maddie was a golden retriever-ish dog. Yep.
My name.
Maddie. But Maddie was named after Madison Square Garden.
Fair.
So in the move, we made a decision, and it wound up being a decision that continues to pay dividends in terms of just fan engagement. I can't say enough about Ellie really appealing to young people, appealing to grown adults, appealing to retirees. There's something in it, and there's something that resonates completely that we'll continue to cultivate.
And a lot of people might think, how is an elephant New York? But Ellie is Ellis Island, right?
Ellie is named after Ellis Island. But there's also another connection point. So when we were researching what a new mascot could be, and you mentioned New York, it's like, oh, we don't really want a rat. What other New York animals, what animals are associated with New York? We didn't want a pigeon as a mascot.
Right, yeah.
And I actually happened to come across a story, it may have been in the Times actually, about the opening 100 years ago of the Brooklyn Bridge. So we were a team migrating from Manhattan by way of Westchester to Brooklyn. And this story actually spoke of people being afraid to cross the Brooklyn Bridge when it opened, and there being a stunt where a herd of elephant was paraded across the bridge to prove out its safety.
Oh, that's so cool.
So one thing led to another, and it's like, oh my God, this is a cool connection point. But elephants also represent strength and intellect and great memories. We're an original team, and we have a legacy. So we just sort of spun off of that. Little did we know, though, that Ellie was going to be the complete vibe on the dance floor that she is. So people want to try their hand at a battle. People want to try their hand at a dance lesson. Yeah. We're here for it.
I love it. I love it. And Ellie has done so much for the Liberty, but the league as a whole, the marketing of it has grown exponentially. The 25th season, the Orange Hoodie campaign, I feel like that was a turning point. Was that, in your point of view, as somebody close to it, something that really catapulted the W?
Absolutely. I think, just as we're talking here about the current moment in the mainstream storylines around women's sports as a whole, right? And even around the WNBA. When I think back to that 25th season, the Orange Hoodie and people wanting to not just say they support the W or buy a ticket to a game, but to wear that logo in bright orange on your back, I think meant a ton. We can't neglect either that, one of the greatest to ever do it, Kobe Bryant, that image of him and his daughter sitting courtside, at games wearing that hoodie was iconic. Yeah. And it was just the catalyst I think we needed, not just, about the thread, but about the conversation. What does it mean to actually show up for these women who are amazing at what they do? And, as I said, he was we all know a personal confidant to many of the players in this league. Yeah. Was training his own daughter, to be, one of the highest caliber players ever. So, it was a special time. I think, like all things, again, it's a catalyst. It's a laundry list of things, though, that were happening at that time that sort of led to that moment, I think, that, sort of brought us where we are today.
Yeah. Now, you've said in the past, everything is sports marketing when it comes to how you amplify sports and athletes. How would you describe just like what goes into marketing a team or a league?
Yeah, for us, when you think about the athlete themselves, you have to be player first minded, or it won't come off authentic, especially in New York. Yeah. The fans will tell you if something feels like it's performative, if it doesn't resonate with what the brand is. And as an original team, I feel like we have a really strong responsibility to ensure that, the folks who fell in love with this team in 1997 because, Teaspoon hit that shot or she ran up in the stands and high-fived, Rosie O'Donnell, it's like bringing that to the futuristic personification of it is really what we're charged towards. So being in Brooklyn is different, new and different for us. The way that our marketing comes to life is really focused on, it begins with players, and then it's the authenticity of what the city represents. Yeah. And that grit and that grind and the resilience. And, we have superstars on our team, but we have journey women who do what they need to do to get us to a win. And I'm so happy they finally got us to the most ultimate wins in the last season. But, after 14 years with the team, what, better depiction of what all those years of bringing together a fan base who really values what the marketability of the Liberty are. It just, it feels incredible to be now champions in the WNBA.
Yeah, yeah. Now, looking at your role and how it's grown and expanded, and you personally and professionally, who's been a mentor to you in your career?
Yeah, several mentors. I know many people refer to them as board of directors. Who is your personal board of directors? And, I look at it sort of in three different categories. There's my family, most notably my mom. I've already mentioned her 2 or 3 times in this interview. She'll find this and she'll listen to it, so I have to make sure. But just someone who she is someone who I can vent to. Yeah. Who I could have a completely in-depth technical conversation about things that may be stressful at work or things that might be really great at work. And she may or may not know the difference, but I know she's in my corner. Likewise, I have several teammates, people I played with in high school, people I played with in college who aren't in professional sports. They think, everything I do is the coolest thing ever. And, to share with them sort of a behind the scenes look or, challenging days, great days, to have just a cohort of people who know the game and understand how much this means to me from a personal standpoint and from a passion standpoint is really incredible and remarkable. But the key piece of my board of directors is definitely folks who I've worked with along these 20 years in and around, the teams and the sport. So most notably, I would say, the former commissioners of this league have been just amazing. Mm-hmm. Donna Orender and Val Ackerman alike are people who I can call up and just, bounce ideas off of. They were a part of the pioneership of this league. They built the groundwork of where we are today. So spent a lot of time, but there's many, many, many colleagues that I call on a week-to-week basis, on a month-to-month basis. There's people I don't call for, a year, or we may not connect, but there's always this sort of sisterhood or this, camaraderie about what we do because I think there's a perception that it is easy. Yeah. And when things are going well, that everything is going well. Yeah. And it just is great to have, sort of that, realistic truth serum type conversations behind the scenes, but definitely help me through a lot of great days, but also the folks who called as soon as we won or the people who were standing in the audience during the parade. Just, great time.
Yeah. Now, when you look at, obviously you've got a lot of people in your corner, but you're in a lot of people's corner, I'd imagine. As the CEO of a WNBA team, not just a woman, but a woman of color in a high position in a league made up of about 80% Black women. How important is that representation?
Yeah, incredibly important. And it's something that I don't take lightly. I didn't have a lot of women of color to look toward when I was working my way through sports, working my way through corporate America. And the this notion that, I'm now CEO or leading a team, I'd never forget sort of those coordinator days, those manager days, those days of first managing people, the days of building a team. And I like to think that I lead with a lot of empathy because of that. You know, I look at a lot of my staff and it's like, well, I've sort of done every job here. So I know how you're feeling, or maybe I don't know how you're feeling because we're in a new time and space, but we can take a time out and we can have a conversation. We can work through things. And it really is about getting people to be their best in the workplace. So I think that representation just as a human being. And then as you mentioned, you add on the intersection of being a woman and a woman in women's sports and then being a woman of color. I think it's incredibly important, and which is why, sometimes my team even says, well, you're too accessible. You take all the calls and you do all the informational interviews. It's important. It's important.
It is so important. And also, like you said, the human being element of it. Because yes, you are a CEO, but you're also a mother and a wife and a daughter. How do you balance all of your roles and take care of your business, but also yourself personally?
Yeah. I don't. If I'm being really real, it's always going to be a work in progress, I think. I was given just the biggest nugget of wisdom when I was entering into leadership by someone at a former company, someone who worked in people practices, who said, you're going to miss some things at work because you prioritized home. You're going to miss some things at home because you prioritized work, but you need to be okay with that. You have to find a way to give yourself grace to know that you're intentional and you're giving your best when you're in each of the distinct places, but that you're no less a mom or no less a professional at either time. It took me years to even have an ounce of that grace that person was describing. And I'm super proud that, my kids are actually 12 and 11. It sounds weird at this time of year. My daughter will be 13 soon, but we're just now at the point where this is a work in progress for the whole family. And not that it's like work for them, but it's like mom has a career and dad has a career. And I've told them, with a big smile and with every single morsel of me, I hope you find something that you love to do when you grow up as much as mommy loves what she does. So this is not that I love you less. I want you to find your thing, and I'm demonstrating that. I'm going to model that to you. And it helps when you get to be on a parade float because I got I bought a little time with them, I think, in terms of, this being all worth it, for the wins, but also just they're true super fans. They can't get enough of not just the Liberty, but of the WNBA, of other women's sports. My son consumes all men's sports. It's just sort of like, not in a forceful way, but to watch a fan become a fan, to that you bore is something really special. So, it gives me different perspective and insight when I think about our fan engagement with, the youth demographic even, it's a beautiful thing to have a team.
I love that. Keia Clarke, CEO of the WNBA champion New York Liberty, thank you so much for taking the time on Her Playbook, brought to you by Kendra Scott. The Her Playbook podcast is presented by Kendra Scott, the jewelry company that's shining bright and doing good. Shop jewelry styles designed for every day and every occasion at your local Kendra Scott store or kendrascott.com.